Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice Podcast. The Heart of Hospice Podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode of the Heart of Hospice is being sponsored by Care Boss, the latest book by Jennifer O'Brien. Care Boss is the book that reminds family caregivers that they are the CEO of their loved one's care. Jennifer has served in healthcare leadership for over 35 years and was also the personal caregiver for her parents and her husband. Care Boss is written to empower caregivers, but it's more than just a book. It's a workbook and organizational tool as well. Check it out at jenniferaobrien.com.
I'm talking with documentary filmmaker Serene-Meshel Dillman about medical aid in dying today and how her parents' decisions to utilize MAID impacted her life and her family. Serene-Meshel Dillman was a New York native and a dancer with a passion for the visual arts who crafted a career in TV, commercial, and film production. Serene's documentary film, Getting to the Nutcracker, was a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to produce the classic ballet, and it garnered 7 major festival awards, including a Grand Jury Prize, Audience Award, Best Direction, and Best Feature Documentary. Her second documentary, The Fifth Dementia, is about a Los Angeles-based band whose members live with Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. They're able to sing and play music despite their neurodegenerative diseases. Take Me Out Feet First is Serene's first documentary series. Season 2 is currently in post-production, and you can watch Take Me Out Feet First on Prime Video. You'll also be able to read more about the series at outfeetfirst.com. Serene shares with me in our conversation the story of her mother and her dad, and how each of them utilized medical aid in dying, or MAID. She explained the different ways her parents responded to their diagnoses and how her mom was more about being in control while her dad really didn't want to have any control and removed himself from the process. We talked about the vibe of the documentary series and the reasons that she chose the music and the videos that she chose. We also talked about some of the people who are represented in the documentary. You're going to hear us talk about Trish and Erica and Andrew Flack, so a lot of the different folks who are featured. Surprisingly, the religious community supports MAID, and Serene is going to be sharing some of the statistics surrounding this in our conversation. So stay with me. It's a great discussion. There's a lot to learn. Serene, it's great to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you.
I have been looking forward to this conversation with you. I've been watching your documentaries, And I'm so excited to take a deep dive into all of your filmmaking. Just amazing work. But we're going to start with an icebreaker question that I didn't tell you about. I like to pull that on my guests. And I'm taking it from the End of Life deck, if you're familiar with that.
I'm not.
It's a set of cards that end-of-life workers can use to prompt conversations about end-of-life wishes, end-of-life understanding, just really about death and dying in general. So here's your question. Growing up, my family dealt with death, A, by talking openly, sharing feelings, stories, and dark humor, or B, in a no-nonsense way, shit happens and you move on, or C, keeping it all bottled up and avoiding any discussion?
Probably a mix of all three. Because unless it was really necessary to talk about, we didn't, which is what I find with a lot of families that I have interviewed. Unless you get to the point where somebody's dying that's in your family, well, they don't really talk about it. It's the person that's dying that sort of forces the issue. I think when my grandparents died, my parents just sort of told us, and there was not a lot of discussion about it because old people die. When my parents were dying, there wasn't really talk about them, their feelings and them, their process of dying. It was more about, when I die, do this, take care of this. I'm worried about this, so please make sure that happens.
So more on the business side of things?
Yeah, business, and look at, like, my mom wanted me to look out for my dad, and my sister-in-law wanted me to look out for her kids. So it was more, when I'm gone, because I can't take care of this. I know you're competent, so will you deal with it?
Right.
So it wasn't like, well, when I'm dead, I want to be cremated, or I don't want a religious ceremony, or leave my money here. It wasn't anything specific. It was always very, just take care of it.
I like that little bit of a to-do list because they trusted you.
My mother actually did a to-do list, yes. And it included water the plants.
Oh, man. She really got down to the details, didn't she?
A little controlling.
She sounds like good people to me. So I want to talk about your mom and dad. So one important thing about your documentary is you weren't just looking at other people out in the world that were experiencing or taking advantage of medical aid in dying. You actually experienced this for yourself with each of your parents. So let's start with your mother, because she was the first of the two to choose medical aid in dying. And I got to tell you that one of the biggest impacts of all of the films inside the documentary, each piece, is this still that you have of your mom. She's lying in bed, and she turned and she looked at you, and she has a smile on her face that is just so beautiful and so peaceful, a little bit of joy. She looks kind of like a scamp. And I'm looking at it and thinking, wow, this is the face of someone with a terminal illness who's choosing to end her suffering, choosing medical aid in dying. Tell me about your mom.
You mean the kind of person as her character, or
yes,
what her history was?
Yeah.
My mom was very much about being happy herself. So if anything interfered with that, she didn't like that. So when she and I weren't getting along, she made my dad's life miserable because she wanted him to sort of broker the relationship, because I had a great relationship with my father. And I think we used to have a good relationship when I was younger, and then we didn't so much. And then we did. It's a lot of back and forth with that over the years. I think I rebelled against her keeping me very close, and I needed some independence, and she just couldn't deal with that. But at the end, we talked for a very long time, and that sort of got itself sorted out. But she was very sure of herself and what she wanted to do. And she had been a terminally ill cancer social worker for many years. And she got really burnt out on it. So she didn't do it for as long as she had wanted to. But when she got her diagnosis, she knew what the prognosis was because of the diagnosis. And so she didn't even entertain the thought of any kind of medical intervention. She knew they gave her a 3-month, I think they gave her a 3 to 6 month terminal diagnosis. It was stage 4 spindle cell sarcoma in her lungs. And so they couldn't take it out, and they couldn't do anything radiation or chemo to help it. So my sister-in-law had died of colorectal cancer literally like 4 months before this. She saw what Silvina had lived through with the radiation and the chemo. Silvina didn't want to use medical aid in dying because she had 2 young children, and she wanted to stick around for as long as she could. So the day of her diagnosis, my mother said to her doctor, "I want to use medical aid in dying. When's the soonest I can use it?" She just wanted out. And she didn't talk to my dad about it. She didn't talk to us about it. She just said, "This is what I'm doing." So she was very sure of herself, and she was happy that she had that option. And she was happy that we all backed her and supported her in her decision. Not that we would have had a choice, but she appreciated the support. And to a certain extent, as kind of mean as this sounds, I think that she liked being in the center of attention at the end of her life. We all came to the house. We all spent time with her. We all spent hours talking to her. And that's really the first time that had happened since we were all growing up with her in a house, right? So I think she sort of enjoyed that. Her brother came in, her best friends were there, our family was all there, her grandkids. I have 2 brothers, their kids. So it was just not a party, but it was just like a big going away chat.
And she was happy to have everybody nearby.
I think so. I think she loved being the center of attention, and that she certainly was.
Maybe some of that joy is what I see in the still for her episode.
I mean, she did a lot of smiling, Yeah. I think she was really happy to not be in pain anymore, for sure. And I think she was, you can never really fully understand what other people's relationships are with other family members, but I think she was kind of ready to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk about one of the scenes between your parents. Your dad was very accepting and very supportive of your mother, right? And he discloses that she did not discuss anything. She came in and she said, "This is what I'm going to do." And I think you asked him, "What did you say to that?" And he's like, "I just went with it because she was independent and single-minded, and that's what she decided, so I respected her decision." But you show a very, very intimate scene between the 2 of them. And I want to highlight it because it really shows the fragility and the vulnerability of someone who's terminally ill, and the intimacy between a caregiver and a care recipient. Your mother was, I believe, up in the bathroom, and your dad was helping her with her personal care. And she was at the point where she couldn't manage it on her own. She could still stand, but she had to have some assistance there. The intimacy that you show between your parents as he helps her with this, it was so moving. It was so moving. How did you feel as an observer, still being their daughter, but being an observer, to be witness to this kind of fragile intimacy that your parents had at that point in her illness?
Well, he was her caretaker. He wanted her to be as comfortable as possible. I think he was just sort of on autopilot, like, this is what I should do. I'm the husband. He always wanted more from her. in terms of her attention, her love, her intimacy. And I think she withheld that. But once she was sick, she couldn't withhold it anymore. So there was a kind of control dynamic there that was interesting to observe. And also my parents growing up, I think, oh, I know, but I think this plays into your question. We're both very open about nudity. They used to walk around the house naked to the point where sometimes friends would come over and they'd be like, oh, excuse me, I'll just go put some clothes on. And she answered the door once when I came home with a boyfriend naked. And I was like, really?
Oh, Lord.
Who are you? So the fact that they were doing that in front of me was something we were all used to. It wasn't unusual. So I wasn't uncomfortable. They weren't uncomfortable. She was talking to me. I didn't include the dialogue for that scene. I put music over it.
Right.
But she was talking to me about what I was wearing, and she was talking to me about what I was going to do later that day. You know, it was very mundane, normal conversation while she's getting lotion put on her body because she can't do it herself anymore by my dad. So it was all very just usual. There wasn't unusual. And so I think even though that is such an intimate piece, it isn't.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that she relied on him so much towards the end was nice for him because he felt needed, because he really was upset that he wasn't consulted and that she sort of did this on her own. And in fact, Sue Guess was the pharmacist for both of my parents through Kaiser, and Sue had a very different, as we all did, a very different experience with the two of them. My dad was not informed like my mom was about what was going to happen with the medicine. He didn't partake in helping with the medicine. He didn't know he kind of checked out.
He was more passive in how he approached it.
I think it was way too hard for him. Like he knew she was dying, and he just was like, he didn't know what to do. And even though Sue was there explaining it, he just was not paying attention. And in fact, when it was his turn 5 years later, he had a very similar reaction. He just, she was talking to him and he was like, yeah, whatever, just let's do this. Mm-hmm. Like they make their mind up, and no matter what anybody says, it's like, wah, 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 wah. You know, they don't really hear it.
Yeah, Charlie Brown's teacher.
Yeah.
You could see this in your dad when you talked to him about your mother. When you guys were sitting outside and you were asking him some question, and he was just this, not really passive, but he was, accepting this is how it went. This is what she decided, and it's the way it went. And your dad was devastated after your mom died, wasn't he?
Yeah. He had some very strange reactions for the next few years. He sent angry emails to friends that he'd been friends with for years and sort of sabotaged relationships. And it was almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, like I'm going to be out of here. So no one will like me anymore. So who gives a fuck?
Right. This is my way of disconnecting from you all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the weird thing was, I think this is a guy thing. I'm going to be totally sexist here, but I think when my parents got married, they met in college. They got married right out of college. They had me. I think my mom was 24 when she had me. I'm the oldest of three. And I don't think they got a chance to grow up. And my dad, when my mom died, started treating women like he was a 21-year-old dating again. And he would get really jealous. He had this one girlfriend for a while, like a year or so later. And he saw her face. They were both on Facebook, and he saw she was a realtor. So some other realtor wrote to her on Facebook, and he flew into this rage, like, oh my God, there's a guy talking to you. And we're all talking him off the ledge. We're like, it's a Facebook. Like nobody's sleeping together here. They're just occasional conversations. And he sabotaged that relationship because of his jealousy. And I kept saying, why? She's a great person. She likes you. She's pretty. You like traveling. Like, do enjoy this. And he acted like a child. And I felt like I was his parent the last few years. I had to take over his finances. I had to take over his emails. I had to take over his insurance. I mean, cars. I took his keys away. Like I became my mother, and I hated it. I hated it. Because I loved my dad. We had a great relationship. He was always my favorite. And the last few years, he just became a child again, and it was hard to be his daughter.
Do you think it was the grief over your mother's death? I mean, because he was not healthy towards the end of his life either, right? He was ill and he was aging. But do you think it was more the grief than anything else?
Helen, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, yes, of course he was grieving. They were married for 58 years, but I mean, like the other Robert says, when I interviewed they were his best friends and my mom's best friends. He's like, pull your big boy pants up and get on with life. After 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year, people don't want that as an excuse for you being an asshole anymore.
Right.
And he got rid of a lot of people. He ran a machete through.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was sad. I mean, you can't get rid of your family, but he got rid of a lot of people that way.
Sounds almost like he took his anger and his grief out on them.
Yeah, he did. But you can only do that for so long. And you can only do that with people telling you not to do it for so long.
True.
At some point I gave up.
So when you think about the two experiences, the medical aid in dying experience with your mother and then with your dad, how would you compare those two experiences for yourself? Were you more comfortable going through it with your dad? Because he went after your mother. Were you more comfortable with the process after that? I
don't think comfortable is the right word. No, I think it was very different for both of them. I mean, I got in bed with my dad at the end. I mean, I was holding him. I closed his eyes.
Yeah.
I held his hand. I was rubbing his forehead. And with my mom, I didn't do that. And I didn't want to do it. So I think that it was different. I'm glad they both had the option. I'm glad they both lived in California where it was legal and they could avoid the pain and suffering that both of their illnesses would have entailed had they not had that option. So I'm very thankful for that. And I felt the same way for both of them in that regard. But I think the whole process is humane. I just did it for 2 of my dogs this year, and it felt the same. I felt like I held my dog and she closed her eyes. She was 17 years old. She was pooping and peeing on herself. And she just looked at me with those eyes, the same eyes my dad looked at me with, like, I'm done. Help me.
It's an amazing thing to be witness and to be part of that, to watch it, right? Because you have in the documentary spoken with many people who utilize medical aid in dying, but it's different to be a witness to one of your parents. So it's been a few years since your parents' deaths. What emotions does the documentary evoke for you? Have you watched it? Do you go back and rewatch the footage? What kind of emotions does that draw out for you?
I don't rewatch the footage. I mean, we're cutting season 2 now, so I'm working on other people and other episodes that I'm not directly involved with. My husband edited it, the season 1, and when he was working on my parents' episode, he would call me in and say, okay, you need to look at this segment that I just cut. And I'd be like, okay. And I went in and I would watch it and I would cry every time. And then I'd say, okay, I'm done. And I would leave.
Yeah.
And he would call, and it was hard for him too, because we've been married for 33 years. So he knew he loved my parents too. So it was hard for him, but it was much harder for me.
Yeah.
And I don't want to watch it again. And I don't enjoy revisiting it. I miss them and I don't mind talking about it, but yeah, I don't see the need to watch that again.
Yeah, I can understand that. This conversation is so good, but we're going to take a quick break. Hang on for more great content.
This episode is being sponsored by Care Boss, the latest book by Jennifer O'Brien. More than 54 million Americans are serving as unpaid caregivers for family members, friends, or neighbors with serious illnesses. Very few have received the training, guidance, or emotional support they need to succeed in this role. Care Boss, the newest book by healthcare leader Jennifer O'Brien, fills this need by identifying and empowering the family caregiver as the leadership position it is. Jennifer shares her motivation for writing Care Boss.
I wrote Care Boss because I have been a serial family caregiver and I have been a serial CEO in healthcare. And it occurred to me that the family caregiver position is indeed a leadership position. I would go so far as to say it is a leadership position of greater importance than the CEO of a Fortune 500 company because this is your person.
Jennifer writes with compassion and hard-earned wisdom. Readers will appreciate the empowerment and camaraderie they find in the pages of Care Boss. Care Boss is more than just a book. It's a workbook and organizer that enables family caregivers to lead their loved ones' care sensitively and effectively. You can find Care Boss at your local indie bookstore or on Amazon and at jenniferaobrien.com.
I want to pause for a second. So we've been talking about your parents, and we're going to move on to the other episodes in the series.
Okay.
But I want to talk about the intro music.
Claude did.
Because I was really struck by the music. It's very ethereal. It's a graceful piece of music. But the visual that you have in the film shows a person in a lab coat measuring, preparing medications, pushing the powders and the pills and things like that. Why those choices that seem to be at odds with each other? They really have two different vibes. And I was kind of struck by that in the opening of each of the episodes.
It's very clinical. There's a very specific concoction of the medicine. It's actually different in a lot of states, from state to state. But when my mom took it was different from when my dad took it. They constantly change it. So the protocol for when my dad took it was that it gets put together at a pharmacy and you're delivered this little bottle. And I had Sue Guest, the pharmacist, explain it on camera. This is how much, this will kill an elephant. You have to drink it in 2 minutes. And that part of it doesn't change. It's a very clinical series of steps that you follow. And when people ask me, like, what happens? Like, what do? Does the medicine get delivered? Do you go pick it up? Do you have to drive somewhere to get it? Do you store it? Do you keep it? Like, there's so many different questions involved with just the medication. And so that was an explanation of what the medication is, how it's prepared, and how it's delivered. And I think that we also took a page from, there's a series, I think it was called Water World with Kevin Costner.
Mm-hmm.
Where they followed a dolly shot, followed along the lines with horses, and kind of, it was very streamlined and very quiet. And I just loved that. I just liked the style, stylistically, I liked how that looked. And so I was trying to do something similar to that. And of course, Claude Debussy's Claire de Lune is an iconic piece that is in the public domain, so I don't have to pay for it.
Yeah, it's free, but it's classic. It's just a very different vibe when you think about the the science vibe that comes off of the visuals on the intro. But I think it's really indicative of what you tried to blend throughout all of the episodes of the documentary, because you're talking to people, but you're talking about the legislation and the laws, or the lack of legislation in certain cases. Is it Dana, the trombone player who lived in Dana, who lived in Minnesota? And, I watched her episode and I'm like, oh man, she's young. She's 26. She's undergoing all this treatment. And they talk about the lack of legislation there. And I'm thinking, okay, she's getting ready to move, or something's getting ready to be put into law so that she can utilize medical aid in dying. And I was surprised. That is not what happened. She chose to stay where she was with her parents and to die naturally, because no laws ever got put on the books. Mm. Why did you include that one? Why did you include her in it? Because she never utilized MAID.
She was fierce. She was a huge proponent in Minnesota for medical aid in dying. I mean, because of her, it might actually pass next year. I was just on a panel for Compassionate Choices in Minnesota a couple months ago. And her parents were there, and her ex-boyfriend was there, Luis, who was also in it. And all the doctors from the Children's Hospital where she got her treatment were all there. And it's a big movement in Minnesota now, and she was a big part of it, just like Brittany was in California when she had to go to Oregon. So I don't know, there's something about Dana that was just so compelling. And I went through like 600 advocates for medical aid in dying around the country when I was looking for people to interview. And then I narrowed it down to 50, talked to all those 50, and then decided to shoot 25. And she was one of them, because she was A, so young, but B, to be so young and be an advocate for medical aid in dying and have that sense of life and death was unique to her. I don't think you see that in a lot of 26. Well, she was 21 when she was diagnosed. So, I mean, I have a 31, 28, and 21-year-old now, and I can't imagine them being advocates for medical aid in dying, let alone, anything else as life-changing as that.
But her diagnosis and its progression just blew up her life. She was living out of the country, a very dedicated musician. And then when she had to come back to the States, living with her parents, she gave up the trombone. She couldn't manage it anymore. Yeah, her story is very compelling. Yeah. So I want to touch on, because she was young and her parents were involved, you had them in the documentary. They were very supportive of her. They were actually proponents of medical aid in dying as well. But in another episode, you had featured a woman who had terminal cancer, metastatic breast cancer. This lady was probably middle-aged, and the lead-in scene is her mother.
Oh, Trisha.
Trisha, yes. It was Trisha and Erica's episode. So yes. Trisha's mother was extremely and vocally outspoken against her utilizing medical aid in dying. And it's not that I was horrified. I'm not sure exactly what the right word is. It was so heartbreaking to see her mother's interaction with her. Tell me about those episodes when you were filming her mother and her mother's responses.
I was there with her brother, her sister, and her mom, all of whom are quite religious. Trisha is an atheist, or she's agnostic. I'm not sure how she defines it. So ultimately it's up to her. But she still had a good relationship with her family because they supported her decision, which everyone I've spoken to is in the same boat. Even if they're from a religious family, everyone is supportive of medical aid in dying. In fact, fun fact, the Christian community across the United States is something like 76 or 78% behind medical aid in dying. It crosses over political lines, religious lines, gender lines, age lines, like you name it, everyone is in support of this. And I think it's really just the Catholic Church, the hierarchy of the Catholic Church that says, God brings you into this world, God should take you out. But when you're dying and that's not what you're thinking about. You're thinking about, I don't want to be in this kind of pain. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to go through another chemo treatment. I don't want to, be wearing diapers in front of my family and not be able to, have my dignity. I think that you can't judge how someone else is choosing to end their life or live their life if you haven't walked in their shoes. And it's just such narcissism to assume that you can. And I mean, I'm telling you how I feel about religion in general by saying that, but Trisha is totally on that page. She wouldn't care what her family said, whether they were in support or not in support. The fact that they were in support, she was appreciative of and loves that they're, are backing her. But
yes,
if they didn't, she wouldn't care.
She didn't engage with her mom.
She doesn't like her mom.
It was pretty obvious. But as far as like arguing or pushing back, this is what I believe. This is, I'm having to suffer, et cetera, et cetera. She didn't have that conversation. Her mother seemed very set in what she believed about Trisha's decision to utilize MAID.
Yes. And there was no changing her mind. So Trisha just would laugh at her.
It was really pretty heartbreaking to watch that. But her siblings surprised me because her sister was very outspoken in her religious views, and she felt that it was wrong to end your own life. But she wasn't particularly condemning of Trisha herself.
No, she respected what Trisha's decision was. Plus, she's seen what Trisha's been going through. I mean, she's in chemo still every 3 weeks.
Yes. So, and we should add that. So these two that are featured in the 5th episode of the series, Trisha and Erica, are both still living. They have not utilized medical aid in dying, at least, not since the documentary aired. And both younger women living with the metastatic breast cancer and still receiving treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Both terminal too.
Yes, still considered terminal. Yeah. There was quite a comparison between Trisha and her mother's lack of support and her condemnation of the medical aid in dying decision, and then Erica's mother, who was very supportive, sitting shoulder to shoulder, having the conversations about all those things.
I would like to just say that my feeling about the difference in that dynamic is a question of education, because her mom had 2 master's degrees. Erica's a professor still with 2 master's degrees. I mean, they are so smart. And when you have that kind of mind, you can't explain a religious story as a life choice. You just can't. Your mind can't. You can't convince yourself that there's some, holier than thou person that doesn't think you should do this, so you're not going to do it, unless that's proven to you as a scientific person or as an intelligent person. It's too hard to accept that as a truth. So the fact that they were living with this pain and suffering and having their breasts removed and having brain surgery and living day to day with the nausea and the horribleness, the bloating, and to live like that, what's happening with your body, what your future entails. And for someone to say, I don't think you should do that. I don't think he'd approve of it. It's like, okay. You're not going to have that conversation, which is why Trisha doesn't have that with her mom, because she'll never get through to her. And it's why Erica can have that with her mom, and they are very close. And she's already had the conversation with her mom. She's already made plans for her son to go live with her brother when she passes. She's made plans for her mom to help out. She's made financial plans. She's still teaching I mean, she's a vital woman living her life day to day in and having the conversation. So, I mean, both of them, I think, and Trisha too is really smart girl. Also with a master's, she lived in Washington and was a lobbyist for many years after serving in the military. She got out.
And Erica, if I'm recalling it, isn't Erica a social worker?
Yes.
Is that right?
But she's a professor. She teaches it through,
Yes.
she was in New Mexico, but then when her cancer became too much, she moved back home to Arkansas. So she teaches virtually now.
Yeah. Interesting women. So Andrew Flack, he's such a character. Mm-hmm. So Andrew is episode 2, terminal cancer, and he actually made some life work out of his experience, as do many people with a life-threatening illness, right? But he had a podcast. He
had a blog.
Yeah, he was very social. He had a great group of friends in the hockey community where he lived. Tell me about meeting him and working with him. He was pretty cool.
He was great. I'm still friends with his roommates. I mean, I invited them up to the photography show I had last night. They're really, it's a tight-knit group of guys. They're really good friends. Andrew, I met again through Compassionate Choices. He interviewed me while we were shooting for his podcast, but he got sick while we were talking and didn't like that. But then after he passed away, Hasban, his roommate, and I, Hasban asked if he could put it out there now that Andrew, because I'm like, well, maybe his listeners should know that he got sick in the middle of the podcast. Like, that's so interesting that while he was doing it. And so I think he kept that in where they said, okay, we're back. I just got a little sick, but I kind of had to chase him a little bit. He even though he was sharing his journey with cancer and medical aid and dying on his podcast, to actually be on camera, he was a little more reticent. But I'm a pushy New Yorker, so I made it happen. And I think once he did it, he was very happy. And we played like a week before he passed away. We went down there and showed him a partial cut, and he was just blown away. So I think ultimately he was happy that he did it. But he never complained. He didn't want people to see him up ill or incapacitated in any way. So I think that's what played into that, the reason behind that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's what took his life. So he was okay with it.
He found a way to counter every piece of nitty-gritty information about his illness or treatment with a joke. He was able to counterweight it. You could tell he was more comfortable sitting in a space where he held things lighter. You could just tell from the conversation. Highlighting the hockey reunion.
They did that for us. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. And his roommates were really some interesting guys. So here, just a couple of guys, they all need a place to live where they can afford it. And they ended up being his caregiver unexpectedly, right? And they shared how that affected their lives. It seemed like it was a pretty big impact.
One of the first questions I asked them was, like, as a mom, if my son became ill with terminal cancer, I mean, wherever I would be, I would up and move there and take care of him. But Andrew didn't want that. So when one of the first questions I said to them was, are you okay with this? Like, why aren't his parents here? Why they're in Illinois? Like, what's going on? And they said, this is what Andrew wanted. He did not want his parents to come take care of him. And he wanted to live his life, and he wanted to try and take care of himself as best he could. And that was his choice. So once I was told that, I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't thinking I'm going to go pinch this mother's head off for not taking care of her kid. You know,
Right.
it's like, and so I ended up meeting Susie, and she's a huge advocate for medical aid and dying in Illinois now. And she's a lovely woman, and his sisters I talked to, and father. I mean, it was a very close-knit family, and they all really supported him and did what he wanted them to do.
Yeah.
They came to visit when he wanted them to visit. They spent the last, I want to say, like 3 or 4 weeks all living together in this house, you know, and taking care of him. And so, you know, that's all, it was all Andrew's doing, for sure.
Yeah, he did it with his own style, and you could tell that's his thing, right? That's the energy that he brings to his episode is he just wanted to live his life his own way.
Right.
Very evident.
Right.
So we're getting close to the end of our time together, but I want to talk about Brittany Maynard.
Okay.
You spoke with Dan,
Yes.
her husband. Great interview, by the way. To listen to a younger person talk about what it was like, the hurdles that she had to jump, the move that they had to make, because they never would have moved if she didn't need to utilize medical aid in dying.
Right.
And he talked about the freedom that she experienced after she got the meds, after the decision was made, but she had not actually utilized them. How that freedom sort of released her from a lot of anxiety and worry about the whole thing. We know that a lot of people get the meds and they don't use them. They pass away naturally. They decide not to use it. There's a comfort level that comes with just getting the meds. Did you see that in anybody that you've spoken with? And
Well, Andrew had the meds for almost a full year.
before
I mean,
he
he
used them?
he had to get a second. I think they expire after a certain amount of time, so he had to
Right.
get a second one. But yeah, the statistic from Compassionate Choices is that 30% of the people that get the meds for medical aid and dying do not use it because there's enough comfort in knowing they have an out if they ended up needing it quickly.
Right. It's like a security blanket, security
Yeah,
net.
and it's huge. And some people even live longer than expected because they have that, right? Even without treatment. So one of the women coming up in season 2, who is a huge advocate here in California, lived for 12 years afterwards. I mean, she's a unique, but I think that Brittany paved the way for sure for this whole movement, and it's slowly making its way across the United States. I think they're going to put it into 19 different legislative agendas in 2025, which would be great. And, you know, it passed in the UK 2 weeks ago after they've been trying for, I think, since 1967. I mean, it's been huge there.
Yeah.
So my hope is that, and the series has been airing in the UK. So and I did an interview there last year about it. And I think the more people talk about it and it becomes normalized in conversation and people understand that they can be with someone still in a very positive and present way at the end of their lives without them being drugged in a bed with tubes in pain for 3 more weeks using the same medication they would use to, you know, take medical aid and die. Even in California, people don't even know about it. It's been legal since 2015. So yeah, I think the more we have this conversation, the more it's on a podcast, the more it's on TV, the more it's included in sitcoms, which it was in Frankie and Grace or something.
I was just thinking about that.
It's on Grey's Anatomy, and I'm like I've had a couple of people, you know, have me talk to the writers of shows to give them the specifics of how to write it in, and it's like, you know, keep it going.
Yeah.
So when we get older, hopefully it won't be as stigmatizing and hard of a conversation. It's like gay marriage, or, you know, who cares now, right? It used to be such a big deal.
Right. So what surprised you, if there was anything that surprised you during the making of the documentary? Was there anything that caught you off guard about how you felt about it? Anything that you didn't know?
Well, I mean, I got some pushback from people. I did some preliminary showings and they wanted me to present the other side. And I was adamant that I was not going to present the other side because I don't think there's another side. I really don't. There's no argument against this. People are autonomous. They do what they want. The rules of medical aid in dying are you have to have a 6-month terminal diagnosis. You have to have 2 doctors sign off on it. You have to be able to do it yourself. But there's enough guardrails. There's 0 chance of it being abused. Right. There's no evidence anywhere that it's a slippery slope. It can't be. You can't convince your mother to do it because if she has any sort of dementia, she can't do it.
Exactly.
Right. And you can't do it if you have a neurodegenerative disease. So I think the thing that changed was that I'm such a huge supporter of it now. I'm such a vehement supporter of it because I've seen what the comfort and the painless exit my parents had, and the other people that used it had. They chose to do it when they were ready to save their dignity, to exit a life without pain and suffering, and to advocate for it for others that followed. I mean, how can you fucking argue with that? It's like that is what has changed for me, is that I am intolerant of anybody talking about it in a bad way.
Yeah. You just have a deeper conviction. Yeah.
Yes, I guess. Yeah. I mean,
so how can my listeners watch the movies?
Well, right now, season 1 is airing on Amazon Prime. Amazon may or may not have season 2. I haven't decided yet. But we'll probably have 6 to 8 episodes for season 2. And you can go to the website, outfeedfirst.com. The series is called Take Me Out Feed First, but the website is outfeedfirst.com, and everything's updated there with links to where you can watch it. And there's also, if you don't have Amazon Prime, there's a link to Vimeo, which is worldwide. So you can download the whole series. It's pretty easy.
It's amazing. It's amazing work. It's impactful. It's important.
I wanted to add one more thing because I know you deal in the hospice world.
Sure.
The woman that was the hospice nurse for my father, who pronounced him dead, I interviewed her twice. Lovely woman. But she worked for a hospice company in Northern California, which I won't name their company. But once I decided to cut their episode, I was going to include part of what she talked to me about, because she's a huge advocate for medical aid in dying. But her hospice company that she worked for would not allow her to do it. I could have done it anyway because she signed a release for me and she spoke to me on a personal level. I didn't want her to lose her job, so I didn't include her, and it wasn't that big a deal. But for the hospice community, it's so important. There's so many different hospice companies, and I think they don't, not that it's their place, but they don't educate their patients as to the option in states where it's legal for medical aid in dying. And I think they should. I really think that instead of just being palliative helping care and helping that in that way, they should say, you have another option if you want it in this state. I mean, I don't know if there's a law. I can't imagine there's a law against talking to somebody about their options.
No, there is
people
not.
Don't. The hospice community does not talk about it. They feel like it's separate, like they're here to come in and help, not to educate anybody about another option. And to me, that would be a huge help for your community, your hospice community, to say to people, this is available in your state. If you want to know a little bit more about it, you can ask your doctor, or you can, read this, or I can refer you to that, or whatever. But I've had so many people reach out and say, where can we watch the series? Someone's going to use medical aid in dying and they want to know what to expect. So literally like 4 or 5 people in the last month have used medical aid in dying after watching the series, because it's sort of, oh, I get it now. I can do this and it's all right. And my family will be okay. It's like, it's a nice exit.
Yeah.
And I want people to know that it's available in the states where it's legal, because so many still don't.
Well, this is why we talk about it on the podcast. So I practice in Texas. There is no death with dignity law on the books here. Medical aid in dying isn't legal. But what I believe is that every hospice practitioner should know a little bit about medical aid in dying, whether it's legal in their state, so that if a patient or a family member says to them, I'm interested in this, I've heard about that, is it an option and what do you know? That we can respond, I think, in a responsible and knowledgeable way to say, hey, it's not legal here. But if you check out the Compassion and Choices website, you can find out more about it. You can find out where it is legal, and you can make your own personal choices.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that would be my hope in having your community hear this, is to know that there is an option. You don't have to suffer at the end of your life, and there are options now.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. This was such a lovely conversation, Serene. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you, Helen. It was fun.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes, and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.